Today's cinematic atrocity is going to be the film Ultraviolet. This movie, oh man, it was dreadful, but in a good way. See, when it comes to so bad it's good movies, or my title for them is cinematic atrocity, you really, sometimes you can't tell. There are obviously some movies where you obviously know they're bad because they have a reputation, like Tommy Wiseau's The Room, or Shyamalan's The Happening, or The Fanatic, that new John Travolta movie. This movie, I have a bit of history with this movie. This movie came out in 2006, and I was going to see it with my dad. However, I saw a review in the newspaper saying it was a dreadful film. I don't think Rotten Tomatoes was around at that time, but yeah, I got like a really bad score on Rotten Tomatoes. But I wasn't like big on Rotten Tomatoes back then. I was more so into the newspaper giving it a bad review. And it was like a full-on like article. So I think my dad and I, we saw Poseidon instead, the remake. That was okay. That was an okay movie. Anyways, Ultraviolet, however, I watched it now, and damn, this movie is pretentious as hell. First off, it's directed by Kurt Wimmer. If you're unfamiliar with him, he directed a pretty solid favorite of mine called Equilibrium back in the, I don't know if that was 1998 or... No, it wasn't 98. It was like 2002 or something. It was like a little after The Matrix. And people call that like The Matrix, the diet version, like a knockoff. But I really enjoy Equilibrium. It's got a great cast. You got, you know, is it Angus McFadden? Yeah, maybe him for the villain. Taye Diggs, you got Sean Bean, Christian Bale. You know, Christian Bale, this was like before American Psycho. Was it? Man, I'm getting all my movies mixed up. Anyways, pretty solid cast. Equilibrium has really great action sequences. So that's kind of what I wanted to see Ultraviolet when I was in high school. But then I never got around to seeing it because the movie sucked, apparently. And then I watched it now. This movie is so pretentious. First off, it starts off with like this sort of comic book montage, like for title sequencing, introducing the cast of characters. And you're sort of like, oh, okay, maybe he's going for the director. Kurt Wimmer, he's written and directed this film. So he's going for a comic book aesthetic. So the music immediately sounds like Spider-Man mixed with Men in Black, which is weird. Because I'm sitting there going like, wow, this music sounds kind of like a ripoff of those two themes. So is this what we're going to get for a movie? The answer is yes. The answer is definitely yes. This movie's main character is Violet. She is a hemophage, basically a vampire. Her and other people in the world have been infected by a super virus that gives them all the powers of vampires, but not the weakness of sunlight, I guess. And they're sort of like a minority group that's been hunted by the humans for the last several years. And basically, she is on a mission in the beginning to get a case from this facility before it gets transferred to the Archministry. The Archministry is run by Draxus. He is like this preening evil businessman. He's actually pretty good in the movie. But Milla Jovovich plays Violet, and she is stiff. She reminds me of Margot Robbie a little bit. I know it's not a fair thing to say because, you know, Margot Robbie, she's okay at acting, but she can be a little stiff. And Milla Jovovich is, man, so stiff. Like, oh, like, this movie came out in 2006. So this was after Fifth Element, after Resident Evil, maybe 1 and 2. But damn, in this movie she plays like an assassin lady or something. She lost a child, got infected, they made her kill the baby, then they kicked her out, or she escaped. She escaped from the facility. She's come back and she's got this special technology that allows her to like basically use like almost like dark matter space or something to basically hold guns, ammo, swords, all this cool weapon stuff. And she basically, every fight scene in this movie is absolutely ridiculous. It's the equivalent of a 10-year-old boy playing with his action figures, and he lines up like 10 soldiers. And then he's got like his good guy soldier. And then the bad guys are like, we're gonna have to kill you, or we're gonna have to take you out. And then the boy goes, and he knocks over all the henchmen, and they're all over in like, you know, less than 10 seconds. That's what this movie is. That's a description of every single action sequence in this movie. I was completely caught off guard by surprise because the action choreography of Equilibrium is actually pretty competent. It's pretty sweet. They have this thing called like gun kata, where you basically, it's like using math and stuff like that. You basically maximize your efficiency in killing. So like, for example, one man with 2 guns could run into a room full of men with guns and kill all of them using angles, and like, it was pretty sweet. Gun kata is pretty cool. But in this movie, she's just so OP to the point of laughability. She'll walk into a room, she'll get surrounded by like 10 guys with shock batons. She'll like do some flips, do some kicks, and they all just like fall over. It's like that scene in the movie Hot Shots Part 2 where Topper has the gun and he's like shooting all of the bad guys and they all fall over, and at the very end he grabs a handful of bullets and throws them at them and they all fall over. That's pretty much every single action sequence in this movie. Every single action sequence is laughable. There's like this scene where she's trying to escape with the case, and 8 guys with machine guns are standing like directly around her in a circle, and she just like blinks and they're all dead because she had a sword on her and she was able to slice them all before. Another thing is, it's a PG-13 movie, so there's no blood. So like, there's a lot of scenes of her like punching bad guys and like their armor shatters. And there's some blood in some scenes because, you know, it's a vampire movie without trying to be a vampire movie. But it just feels hilarious because people are like cutting each other up with swords and stuff. And they're just like falling over like a high school play that can't afford stuff like that, you know? Like having like 5 vampire warriors come in and slice up 5 scientists and there's like no blood, and then she slices a whole bunch of guys and no blood. It's just hilarious, unintentionally hilarious. Let's see what else. Oh man, okay, the helicopter chase. The helicopter chase is oh my god, I can't even like describe it. There's like just no words. So essentially, in order to escape the facility she's in at the beginning of the movie with the case, she wears like this gravity belt thing that basically lets her walk on walls and ceilings without consequence. And then when she gets outside, it applies to her motorcycle. So she's like driving around on the motorcycle as she's being chased by cars and choppers. And the visual effects are so shitty. It looks like she's been trapped. The entire cast of this movie has been trapped in a PlayStation 1 video game. That's what it feels like. Because this movie came out 3 years after The Matrix Reloaded. So that movie has pretty good visual effects. But I don't know the budget for this movie, so I'm going to go check real quick. Ultraviolet's budget was a mere modest $30 million. And a lot of that probably went to the sort of sci-fi settings because they all look like shit. And Matrix Reloaded obviously is a sequel, so it's obviously going to have a bigger budget. So it's not fair to compare, like, you know, the visual effects, because that visual effects budget for The Matrix Reloaded was $150 million versus $30 for Ultraviolet. So in a way, it's basically just director Kurt Wimmer being a little too ambitious, you know. They didn't have to have a full-on like 7-minute chase scene, you know, where a person's driving a motorcycle on walls and crashing into skyscrapers and being chased by 2 helicopters with Gatling guns. So it's just a sort of, you know, he tried to stretch the budget a little bit too much, and it makes the film look horrendous. What other scene? Oh my god, there's actually so many scenes in this movie. This movie was a laugh riot, and I loved every minute of it. There's the teacup scene. Oh my god, okay. So the bad guy is this preening villain named Draxus, and there's a scene where he sends a bunch of his men to kill some hemophages. The hemophages manage to fight back, and they get to him, and he fills up a cup of tea and manages to take them all out in this like crazy scene, and then he drinks the tea. It's just so pretentious. Like, the movie script is like the dialogue is awful. The dialogue, people will repeat something immediately after saying something, like, you know, we find out, okay, the mild spoiler here. It doesn't really matter, honestly, because you're not watching this movie for its story. But basically, the case has a child inside. The child has like special blood that can either create a virus to kill all of the hemophages on the planet or cure them of their vampire affliction. So there's a scene where like she brings it to her boss, and he's like, it's a child, and she's like, it's a child, and he's like, a human child, she's like, a child, and they repeat it over. This thing happens like multiple times in the movie. It's not like a thing where, you know, it happens once or twice. This happens constantly. They'll say something like, it'll wipe out the planet, and he'll be like, so what? She'll be like, the death of everyone. That's not a direct quote. That's just like an example of basically them pushing, you know, the dialogue twice or three times to hit you over the head with it. And this happens like 6 or 7 times. So this is a huge problem with the script. I don't know if Kurt Wimmer wrote Equilibrium. Let's check. He did write and direct that movie. So, I mean, that's why I was really confused when that movie review came out. And they basically said, you know, Ultraviolet was an awful movie because Equilibrium is a solid movie and there's no difference between the two. I mean, Equilibrium did bomb at the box office, but both films are written and directed by the same man. I'm gonna look up the Equilibrium's movie budget just in case. Even less. That movie costs only $20 million and looks way better than Ultraviolet. So I'm guessing it's just the way he tried to do too much with his resources. Let's continue. So the human child, his name is Six. He is basically played by Cameron Bright. Decent actor, but he's not allowed to have any range in the movie because he's supposed to play like this son of Draxus. He's supposed to be like this stiff, not a prodigy, but he basically can't emote. And you know what happens when you have a main character who's stoic and stiff, and you have a supporting character who's stoic and not stoic, but just stiff? You get literally like... There's a scene in this movie where they're supposed to be having a tender bonding moment, and honestly, it honestly feels like a stock image was put there instead, because the two of them, I guess they're not strong. It's not that they're not good at acting, it's just that this movie doesn't give them a lot to work with. I mean, honestly, the plot is so thin, you couldn't wipe your ass with it, because things change every 5 minutes just because the story demands it, and like... she might as well look at the camera and say, this is a metaphor for my dead son. Every time, you know, she looks at the kid or wants to save the child. What do you mean the child? I want to rescue the child. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. But what else? Oh, okay, there's like many other scenes. Okay, so after she saves the boy again, he gets kidnapped by rogue hemophages. After that's the teacup scene. And yet again, we have another fight scene where you have like 10 guys show up, they surround her, and she manages to like just knock them back. Not with magic or anything. It's like, she is a hemophage, so she has super strength, intelligence, and agility, stamina. But in the context of that scene, she has the same like powers as they do. So I mean, it's equivalent of you walking into a fight ring and being attacked by 10 people and you just like going like this and they all just fall over. It literally feels like that scene from Hot Shots Part 2. Every time character she's got plot armor. Like, I know in the movie she literally is wearing leather, but she might as well just like have the words plot armor on the back of her leather tank top or jacket. She's always wearing like this weird technology that lets her change her outfit color and her hair color at will, because, you know, I have a feeling that Kurt Wimmer's son actually wrote this movie, or his nephew or cousin or son of a woman he liked or dated, because this movie is so juvenile. Like, having her change her outfit color has nothing to do with the movie. Let's see. So after she defeats all the... Okay, there's this blatant ripoff of the movie... one of the Lone Wolf and Cub films, I think the second film, involving a well of sorts. That's just a blatant ripoff. I knew that. You can't, you know, just steal from movies like that. You're not Tarantino. This movie's not even close to Tarantino. All right, I gotta keep going. Okay, so another character in this movie is Garth. He's played by William Fichtner. He's actually pretty good in the movie. He's like a vampire scientist or sorts, and hemophage scientist, and he's just like an exposition machine. He's probably the only person in the movie that's like gives a decent performance besides the villain. The villain's very campy. I didn't mind him. He literally, you know, wears a suit at all times, and he's like, you know, I'm the villain basically because, you know, I look vaguely menacing, and, you know, I have a lot of men on the payroll. You might as well just have the word bad guy tattooed on his forehead or put on the back of his suit jacket. But anyways, Violet has to go back to the compound or whatever, and there's another fight scene in the library where she basically has guns and she just twirls around in a ballet of death, and they just like literally walk into the room and fall down. I once did a student film when I went to film school where it was a parody of action movies where something like that happens, where like the action hero just goes like this and they all just like fall over. This is what that felt like, except that instead of a student film There's a $30 million budget film with Mila Jovovich, a professional actress, and professional stuntmen, and like actors who had to dress up in armor, walk into a room and fall down immediately. There's a point in the action sequence where she looks like she's just firing staplers, to be honest. Those guns, the little ones that she uses all the time, they look like staplers. So someone could easily do a hilarious parody where, you know, someone in the office is like shooting everyone with staplers. But yeah, so how many action sequences? There's the opening facility breakdown, there's the helicopter chase, there's the fight on the rooftop. Oh man, that scene is hilarious. I can't even... I'm gonna have to get into that too. I don't care how long this video is. Basically, okay, so in this movie, whenever she's walking around with a boy, and there's like some enemies, you know, she'll be like, oh no, enemies are coming. And they'll just cut to them safe. It happens twice in the movie. It pissed me off so much because, you know, it's like that scene in Minority Report where Tom Cruise is running around with a girl and, you know, the bad guys are there. And instead of her helping Tom Cruise escape, they just like leave them all and they're fine. That's what it felt like. It pissed me off so much because, you know, this movie is like the opposite of Minority Report. However good Minority Report is, that scenes with Tom Cruise and the precog, this movie's the exact opposite. And it's just, oh man, I guess the script couldn't be bothered to be like, they escape, you know, through an exit or corridor. She just literally just calls up a hologram and goes, yeah, I need to know where the base is, and then she's gone. So that happens twice, and then when she's trying to escape with the boy, she goes up and has a lengthy conversation with some Chinese gangsters. They're not vampires, they're maybe descendants of vampires, but there's a scene where the camera keeps like zooming in on their sunglasses and then zooming out into a gun barrel and then into her eye, and then they do it for like a minute, like a full-on minute of just the camera zooming into shiny things. And then she does a fight scene where she doesn't do anything but dodge, and the bad guys, they all shoot each other by accident. It's like, on paper it sounded cool, you know, like, you know, she's just so awesome that, you know. But then every single person, I guess the incompetence is just like part of that gang, you know, just run into the room and just start shooting blindly. And if she moves out of the way and you accidentally kill your own men, you don't, you know, line up or anything. You just keep going. So that's the third action sequence. Then there's the fourth one with the vampires in the cemetery. And then there's the final one in the library, the one where, because she's shooting so many bullets, little pieces of paper falling like snow. Honestly, I feel that like he wrote it down on paper and it sounded good, but he was just kind of like, nah. It sounded good on paper, but like he went with it and it didn't work. You know, he's probably wrote down like, Violet does a ballet of death. She swings her arms and people are no match. And that was another big problem of the movie. I mean, it's not even a movie where you could just watch and just enjoy the action sequences, because there's no like sub-boss character or anything like that. There's no like, you know, head bodyguard or sub-boss. It's just waves of nameless henchmen, and they all just run in and die. And there's no suspense at all. And then, oh yes, the climax. Oh wow, okay. So basically she gets to the final villain, and he's fighting her with a sword, because, you know, why not? And two twists happen. There's one during the fight scene and one after the fight scene. These twists are also pretentious too. That's what's so amazing about this movie. It's like they keep trying to change the narrative every 10 minutes, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. And then they just go back and forth, and a character will just be like, oh man, you can't do that. But then 10 minutes later it'll be like, by the way, we can do that now. And it just happens. And it just, so during the fight scene, basically he makes the room go dark, and he fights her, and then she manages to set her sword on fire somehow. I don't even know how. Like, because I guess she probably pulled a lighter out of her dark matter suit thing. Obviously, she put a lighter in there. And they have this, and like, this is another thing where it sounded cool on paper, but when executed was lame, because you can't see anything. It's basically like a black room, and then a flaming sword, and then they both have flaming swords. And, you know, I guess like, it sounds epic, you know, like, and then Violet lit her sword on fire to give her some light, and then she fought Draxus, and then his sword was on fire, and it was a whirlwind dervish of flaming steel. It doesn't work when you see it in the movie because it's so badly edited, and you can't see anything because they're in the dark room, and it's just like a laughable climax with a really pretentious twist in the movie. And then immediately after, they have another twist. And that twist is also super pretentious. It'll make you groan. It'll literally make you groan. You're not a human being if you don't groan when you find out about the final twist. So the movie ends with another pretentious voiceover mimicking the first. She's like, I was born in a world I didn't understand. And then I'm guessing, she's basically going to continue being a fighter for justice. Even though, not really. But anyways, that is the movie Ultraviolet in a nutshell. A movie that Kurt Wimmer had no excuse to make bad. If I had to guess why this movie became so blown out of proportion, I mean, first off, cast downgrade. I mean, he had $10 million more in Equilibrium, but the cast comparison doesn't compare. Look at Christian Bale, Sean Bean, Taye Diggs, and Angus McFadden versus Mila Jovovich, William Fichtner in his small role, and a couple of Cameron Bright and the villain. He's okay. Yeah, definitely a downgrade right there. No sub-boss characters. The action sequences are all pew pew pew, not pew pew pew. Not even, man. It's literally so many. The director was just obsessed with having her be so overpowered and awesome that she could literally have 30 men with guns trained on her, and she's able to escape and just knock them all over. There's nothing wrong with the action sequences, except that they're just overly edited. It feels like all of the men are just collapsing around her, like some sort of it's literally defies belief. Literally, bad guys will run into the room with swords, and she'll be moving in a way that and he'll be like, oh, I accidentally stabbed someone that was on my side. And this happens at least 10 times during the fight scenes, especially the rooftop fight scene with the Chinese gangsters, because they basically only do that for the entire action sequence. And yeah, so I think this one will be my longest cinematic atrocity video, simply because it's still fresh in my mind. But this is my favorite cinematic atrocity so far that I've discovered. I mean, obviously, I'm going to say it's on par with The Room. And the reason why I say that is because it's hard to get big budget action sci-fi movies to be so bad it's good, because usually they're just, bad and they're not unintentionally funny. But this one, wow, it's up there. Because any movie can be unintentionally funny when it's a drama or a comedy, right? But damn, this movie was just on another level. So in a cinematic atrocity score, I give it a perfect 10, on par with Tommy Wiseau's The Room.